and welcome to the SciFirst MovieTalk episode. So in this episode I'll be discussing the 2008 horror cum thriller movie and sequel Saw 5, as directed this time around by David Hackl in his movie directorial debut after working as part of the production crew for Saw 2, 3 and 4. So, as per my review for the last few movies in the franchise, I will issue the same disclaimer. What I would say is that if you haven't watched Saw 5 specifically, or, to be honest, any other movie in the franchise, then I wouldn't watch this review. Now, I'm going to try and keep it as spoiler-free as I possibly can, but by insinuation, I may end up giving something away, most certainly more than likely for the previous films in the series. And this film, like all the rest of them, are films that you need to watch without no prior knowledge of what's going on when you are watching them to get the maximum enjoyment. However, like I said, given the way that the third and the fourth movies kind of ended, where this movie picks up, it's going to be difficult to avoid talking about where this movie goes without a spoiler or two. So, if this does apply to you, switch off now, as I always say, but please do come back to SciFirst MovieTalk and let me know what you thought of the film. I would love to know. I always love to know what you guys think of these movies that I am reviewing. Otherwise, for those of you that remain, okay, are we ready? So, Saw 5 starts immediately, once again, following the events of both the third and the fourth movies, which happened concurrently, once we obviously had found out this at the end of the fourth, and sees Detective Mark Hoffman, as played by Costas Mandylor, following his big reveal, if you like, as one of Jigsaw's killer's accomplices at the end of the fourth movie. So again, although the Jigsaw killer, the original one, aka John Kramer, as played once again by Tobin, is now dead, Hoffman is continuing his legacy, if you like, whilst also at the same time trying to cover up his involvement in Jigsaw's work. Jigsaw, of course, being the antagonist from the first three movies, with a, shall we say, fairly unique idea on rehabilitating people who are, in his opinion at the very least, wasting their lives or those of those around them, testing them with a series of often gruesome and nearly always fatal games. This entry into the franchise sees FBI agent Peter Strahm, who we last saw trapped at the end of the last movie, as played once again by Scott Patterson, escape Jigsaw's labyrinthian lair, only to be captured and then placed into a game of his own, which he ingeniously survives. Strahm and Hoffman are then embroiled in a dangerous game, if you like, of cat and mouse, as Strahm tries to prove that Hoffman is indeed Jigsaw's accomplice, and Hoffman tries to frame Strahm to deflect any attention from him. This is all set against a new game being played, set up by Hoffman, this time in a series of sequential rooms where 5 strangers must find a way to work together to overcome the gruesome and the diabolical traps set to test their resolve and will to survive, whilst also trying to figure out their reason for actually being held as part of Jigsaw's master plan. And just what they have all in common, if you like, in order to beat the game in which they reluctantly find themselves. So, for me, this entry is actually a massive step up from the fourth entry. Very much somewhere between kind of on the level of the second and the third movie, in terms of its style and its substance. Okay, so I would say from this point onwards, let's face it, the gore is what takes centre stage, and this movie ups that ante tenfold, with some of the most gory sequences of the franchise so far. But it does, to its credit, also try to weave its own path into the franchise, both kind of tying up some of the loose ends from the fourth movie, whilst also injecting some further story elements of its own, in order to try and divert away from the reliance on Jigsaw as a character, with, of course, Hoffman now being the replacement and the main antagonist of the series going forwards. There is less mystery in this movie, of course. Now we know that Hoffman is indeed Jigsaw's accomplice. And the film doesn't try to kind of make a big play for that shock ending, if you like, that had become kind of such a trademark of the series up to this point. The film, however, still has a few tricks up its sleeve, absolutely, but these are a lot more subtle and are kind of invested into the games themselves. And their execution, which I did think was very much worth the effort this time around. Indeed, this movie has some of the most ingenious and inventive games that we have actually seen in the series so far. And they are very much more in the style of like a puzzle box scenario rather than out-and-out execution. Which, of course, inevitably happens. Hey, you know, it is Saw after all, but at least we do actually have some time to try and figure out solutions ourselves in these circumstances, which really does add a little bit more of a flavour to the movie's audience participation, if you like. However, for me, I found the cinematography to kind of revert it back to kind of that crazy camera work that we had in the first and the second movies, with the camera kind of jumping around all over the place in order to try and suggest just how tense that scene was getting, which does get a bit off-putting at times, and really, it was completely unnecessary in this instance. I did find this to actually be more of a well-thought-out entry than the fourth movie, absolutely. Not the best in the franchise, we'll leave that for the first one, to be fair. Well, certainly the series, it is the series' own swan song, given the direction of what's going to follow, if you like. The characters in this movie are placed and presented very well. They are more edgy than the way they were played in the last entry. I mean, Costas Mandylor is no Tobin Bell at all. But that's an extremely hard act to follow. Hoffman could never be considered as Jigsaw's replacement. Always, only ever his accomplice. Even after Jigsaw's death, Jigsaw still commands a serious presence that Hoffman just simply does not. But you do get a feel for the character's development in this entry, and even Scott Patterson actually brings a more rounded and solid performance than he did in the fourth, with both being a lot more sure of where both of their characters were heading, and you can certainly feel this in the way that they are actually portrayed on screen. Unfortunately, one of my main issues with Hoffman as an accomplice, if you like, continuing Jigsaw's work, is really quite simply, it was easy to actually see how Jigsaw set up the traps with his cold and his calculating behaviour, and of course his engineering background, you know. However, Hoffman, not so much. He simply just doesn't command the same presence, and really kind of comes across as somebody who would just get somebody else to do it. And when you then consider that the traps Hoffman has supposedly set up are more inventive than Jigsaw's, and yes, I know Jigsaw's designed them, but I would imagine Hoffman still had to put everything together, unless it was already there. This element just really doesn't stand up for me, if that was the case, you know? From Hoffman's perspective, though, in fact, to a great degree, Mandylor, he does a decent job of trying to make the series focus on his character from here on in this movie specifically. We do get to delve fairly deeply into how the character was actually recruited by Jigsaw, and how what started out as vengeance was turned into the hold and the power that Jigsaw had over him. And unlike the story in 4, which kind of seemed kind of tagged on to the series, the way that the story here is presented feels a lot more integrated, connected, if you will, more natural and less forced upon us, with some very clever links and tie-ins to the second and third installments, worked very well into the story, which actually was really excellent once again to see how some of the earlier traps were indeed set up, revisiting some of Jigsaw's earlier work from a new perspective, if you like. The film also takes us back to the kind of investigative style, if you like, we last saw in the first movie, in order to kind of tell the main story through the work of Strahm as he closes in on Hoffman, which makes a really nice touch overall and almost felt like it brought the story kind of full circle. Overall, considering how stale the fourth entry seemed, given a new director at the helm, and indeed the fact that this probably features the least amount of Tobin Bell in the series so far, this isn't actually a bad entry into the franchise at all. It doesn't stand out as the best by far, but it's more than entertaining. It's gory, indeed it has some excellently designed traps, some of the best and most ingenious that we've actually seen in the series so far, and with some excellent kills. In fact, ending with two of the most squeamish to date, but at the same time trying to provide us with enough story and intrigue to keep the momentum of the series going, at least for a little while longer. It delves more into the control and the manipulation Jigsaw commands over others, and examines how he anticipated the human condition, with some relatively intriguing victims, with a decently padded out backstory. So that brings me to the end of this episode. I do hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please leave a like. Please do hit that subscribe button for more movie reviews, trailer reactions and other movie related content. We've absolutely loved having you here at SciFirst MovieTalk, and we would definitely love to have you back. But most of all, thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.